Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm Darren McBreen. It is Thursday, June 4th, 2015. Here's a quick look what's coming up.
Tonight, VA workers tell all over drinks. Then, the new scheme to disarm America. And U.S. officials say that ISIS has teamed with Assad. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me three times. Stick a fork in us, we're done.
Since the beginning of the so-called civil war in Syria, the Obama administration has armed, funded, and trained radical jihadists as a tool to overthrow Syria's president, Bashar al-Assad. This is how ISIS was created by Western intelligence to destabilize the region and send in a U.S.-led coalition for a good old-fashioned regime change. And this is something we've known about for a very long time. From Zygmunt Brzezinski's grand chessboard to the PNAC documents, Syria has been on the U.S. target list, or at least targeted by the U.S. military-industrial complex, who now runs the show. And don't forget, it was like 8 years ago that four-star General Wesley Clark, he said that the U.S. planned to overthrow Syria a long time ago. We're talking all the way back, as far back as 2001, shortly after 9/11.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So the current course of events in the Middle East predetermined by the United States. And as it turns out, the war against ISIS, well, it's not exactly what the establishment media, or the Obama administration for that matter, it's not what they make it out to be. This has been a long and thought out plan, even before Obama ever took office. And once again, this is to destabilize the region in Syria and then go on in there and take it over militarily. I mean, this is right out of the CIA's playbook on regime changes, complete with America's role as puppet master.
But I am proposing that you will be giving arms to the side that is fighting against Assad that has elements of al-Qaeda. There is a great irony there. I am also saying that in your rush to get involved in Syria, that you may well be arming Islamic rebels who will be shooting Christians. It's hard to argue that the Syrian rebels that you will be arming are not associated forces of al-Qaeda. Are they not fighting on the same side of a war? Can you argue there's no connection between them, that really this is a three-way war? I know that's the way we're trying to break it down. I don't think it's that easy to say that. I think it's impossible to say that the Syrian rebels are not associated with al-Qaeda. So there is a great irony that you will be arming forces that a normal common sense use of the word associated can say that these people are associated with al-Qaeda. That's all. Thank you.
Well, Rand Paul certainly knows what's going on. And, you know, it's one thing to speculate, but we've got hardcore proof, all right? The information is everywhere, outside the mainstream media anyway. And recently, Judicial Watch, they obtained a host of secret U.S. government documents through a federal lawsuit. And it shows Western governments deliberately allied with al-Qaeda and other Islamist extremist groups to topple Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And it goes on to say that the West intentionally sponsored violent Islamist groups to destabilize Assad, despite anticipating that doing so could lead to the emergence of an Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria. In Zero Hedge, they wrote a detailed article on all this. Secret Pentagon report reveals U.S. created ISIS as a tool to overthrow Syria's President Assad. And this confirms everything that we've been saying for a long time. And look, Russia, China, and Iran, they all support Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. And they know exactly what the U.S. government is doing right now. So this is a very dangerous game we are playing. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, well, he says that they know that the U.S. is using ISIS as a pretext for bombing Syria. And he warns that such a development could lead to a huge escalation of conflict in the Middle East. Well, you could say that again. And now U.S. officials from the embassy in Syria, they are claiming via Twitter that the Syrian government is aiding ISIS. And of course, we know that that's a bunch of BS. Don't believe the hype. ISIS is a Frankenstein created, funded, and supported by the U.S. government and Saudi Arabia, our partners in crime. Well, it looks like the Justice Department wants to ban more Americans from owning firearms. That's right. Barack Hussein Obama is proposing new firearm regulations that will flat out revoke gun rights for those the federal government declares to be mentally unfit. And that's a scary thought, considering the fact that the official diagnostic system for mental disorders in the U.S., the DSM-5, it is so broad that almost every form of human behavior can be diagnosed as some type of mental illness. And don't forget, it was back in 2012, so not very long ago, that the Department of Veteran Affairs, they actually sent out letters to U.S. military veterans informing them that their competence levels were under review. And if the federal government rated them incompetent, they would be prohibited from purchasing, possessing, receiving, or transporting a firearm or even ammunition. And they weren't screwing around either, because lots of veterans lost their God-given right to self-defense as the Second Amendment was completely trampled on by the Obama administration.
So everybody who's a veteran, here's the article, federal government moves to disarm veterans. They're all getting a letter saying that we will order you to relinquish your guns or we'll send police to take your guns, no judge or jury. And physical reasons. They're now taking veterans' kids if your leg's blown off. Okay, and there's the letter notice if you're watching us on InfoWars News at prisonplanet.tv. Going to Mr. Schmecker, here's the headline. Veterans' guns confiscated after forced psychiatric evaluation. Purge against arms ex-servicemen accelerates. And so just briefly, tell us the story of what happened to you, what precipitated it, and where your guns are now, and how they're charging you for the days you were held at the hospital. David Schmecker, thank you for joining us.
Yes, no problem. Yes, I requested to see a pain management specialist, and they came back to me, the Veterans Administration came back to me and said that you have to see a half hour of a psychiatrist and a half hour of a psychologist for a spine injury. And I refuse to do that because I have a spine injury. I don't really, I don't want to see, especially not a veterans hospital psychiatrist. Yeah, so I refused, and 6 months later, basically the hospital, my primary care physician called to have a wellness check placed on me, and the local police perform a wellness check. Well, the local police came up, and there was nothing wrong with me. I had no, there was no anxiety. I wasn't combative. I basically, but I wasn't with anybody, so I had no witnesses, and they didn't have a warrant, and they, through intimidation, forcefully commandeered my vehicle and entered my home, searched and seized my weapons, and then, carted me away in an ambulance to psychiatric evaluation, which I was held for 72 hours.
So there's a good example of what started back in 2012, targeting veterans. Now they want to test all of our competence levels. to see whether or not we are responsible enough to protect ourselves and protect our very own families. And other proposed regulations include, get this, they want rules on where our firearms are stored and how they are stored in our very own homes. Man, I tell you what. And there will even be new restrictions on what they determine to be high-power pistols. Whatever the hell that is, it should be interesting. That's their words, not mine. High-power pistols. So that should be an interesting list indeed. And of course, we learned to expect all this from the Obama regime, even though he originally campaigned against it.
When y'all go home and you're talking to your buddies and they say, he wants to take my gun away. You've heard it here. I'm on television, so everybody knows it. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in people's lawful right to bear arms. I will not take your shotgun away. I will not take your rifle away. I won't take your handgun away.
Wait a minute. Was that evidence of a corrupt politician breaking a campaign promise? I mean, that never happens.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Yeah. And if you think a Republican president is going to jump in and repeal all this in 2016, think again, because it ain't happening. You know, I'll be the first to tell you that I know none of this is happening overnight, but it is indeed happening. The globalists want America unarmed. They want us castrated. So gun confiscation is happening. They're off to a good start, and they're doing a little song and dance. This is what I call the 2 steps forward, 1 step back routine. And here's how it works. The Obama administration introduces ridiculous and outrageous gun restrictions that inspire outrage all across the country. 2 steps forward. Then Obama backs away from the plan while trying to preserve as much of the plan as possible. This is a tactical withdrawal. 1 step back, and of course that equals 1 step closer to total gun confiscation. You see, there's always portions of the gun restrictions that survive the public's backlash. And if you think about it, I mean, it's very clever. This is how they make progress, and this is how they take away our guns. For example, they may not succeed in banning AR-15 ammo, all right? But what they do is other measures will be pushed through. And then the Democrats come back with a compromise. And they tell everyone, hey, let's be reasonable. Let's meet halfway on this issue. That's how it's done. Meanwhile, they launch a massive propaganda campaign through movies and television trying to convince you that gun owners are bad, not to mention very dangerous.
Part of every day, some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
That's right. And it was Attorney General Eric Holder who said they were talking about plans of making us gun owners wear electronic bracelets. Remember that?
Vice President Biden and I had a meeting with a group of technology people and talked about how guns can be made more safe by making them either through fingerprint identification, the gun talks to a bracelet or something that you might wear, how guns can be used only by the person who is lawfully in possession of the weapon.
Wow. And they want us to have psychological evaluations. I tell you what, that guy's crazy right there. There's no way I'm ever wearing an electronic bracelet. And as long as we're playing Eric Holder clips, might as well throw in a Dianne Feinstein while you're at it.
If I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it.
From my cold dead hands, Feinstein. And remember, this is all going on while at the same time the federal government and the Department of Homeland Security, they are stockpiling massive amounts of weapons and ammunition. While at the same time, they are declaring publicly that the #1 domestic threat to our country is returning veterans. And one way